So I was asked to give the lawyer's perspective, the legal perspective to today's theme. And I will do that by actually drawing on 3 points. The first point that I want to make is that Brexit, and especially the objective of the government as it was stated this week, to take the UK outside the single market and the customs union creates certain tensions within the UK constitutional structure. It is possible to absorb those tensions by finding some kind of imaginative solutions, and EU law provides for this kind of flexibility. That's my second point. And my third point would be that this kind of legal flexibility is dependent on political willingness. So let me take those points in order. So the first point that I want to do is to show how actually the decision of the Brexit decision, but mainly the decision of the government to take the UK out of the single market and the customs union, will create certain tensions within the constitutional structure, and I'm going to mainly focus on Northern Ireland. So if the UK gets out of the single market, this will mean that there will be, for the first time after many, many years, a land border on the island of Ireland. Of course, people are saying that there's not going to be a border, but when they say that there's not going to be a border, what they mean is that there's not going to be a physical border, so you're not going to have to show your passport. However, even if that's the case, if the UK actually does not require for people to show their passport in order to cross the border, and they will just check the right to work and the right to access social benefits, still there will be a customs border. So goods would have to actually be checked whether they comply with the relevant customs rules. What does that mean practically? It means, to give an example, if you have a company in the Northern Ireland and you produce sausages and you get your meat from the south of the island, and then you want to sell it back in the EU, you will have to face customs authority at least 2 or 3 times while you didn't do that. This might seem trivial, but it's a very, very serious concern, especially within the border communities of both sides of the border. In fact, I was last week in Brussels and I was speaking with some MPs from the Northern Ireland and some businessmen from Northern Ireland, and they were actually quite desperate about the economic implications of Brexit to them and how this is going to translate into social dynamics. Now, before the referendum took place, the Leave campaign, but also the DUP was the main ruling unionist party in Northern Ireland, which was in favor of Leave, they were brushing aside all these kind of suggestions that there will be a hard border. After the referendum and after Brexit happened, the former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Arlene Foster, came out and said that actually, most probably, there will be some kind of border. Again, Theresa May, and she reiterated this week, she said that she doesn't want to have a border in Ireland and she will make everything possible in order to avoid this uncomfortable situation. However, so far, we haven't heard, either from the UK government or the Northern Ireland executive, I mean, it has collapsed now, any concrete suggestion about how to actually deal with this important problem. The closest we came to any concrete suggestion was last October when Arlene Foster came out and said, we are going to use technology in order to deal with the border. But this is as vague as it can get, and it definitely doesn't give any concrete answers about how to deal with this very, very important problem. Now, I said before that there are solutions to deal with this problem, and I personally have argued some time ago that one way that the UK and Ireland can deal with this problem, and the EU, they can actually check what the EU is doing in Cyprus and how Northern Cypriot goods, although they are outside the customs union, can get inside the EU and be actually circulated as EU goods. And the point that I want to make, and why I'm referring to that, is actually to show that the EU has actually dealt with similar problems, with trying to actually deal with this kind of borders around Europe. If you look at the map of territorial application of EU law across Europe, you will see that it's full of exceptions, it's full of flexibility. The EU has been particularly imaginative in order to deal with this kind of political problem. So the legal toolbox of the EU is there. There are solutions that can be used. And that's why, for those that have followed the debate, there are so many different models that have been used, the reverse Greenland, the Northern Cyprus, and so on and so forth. However, and this is my third point, flexibility, this kind of flexibility, depends on political willingness. All those legal solutions have been used because there were political powers within the member states, within all those member states in question, and the rest of the EU, that agreed to have this kind of solutions. I said before that Theresa May, at least expressly, has said that she wants to find a solution for Northern Ireland, and she will try to find kind of an imaginary solution in order to absorb the tensions for the Brexit. So there is some kind of political willingness with regard to Northern Ireland. Perhaps this is why the Scottish government, when they released the paper about Scotland's position in Europe, in many, many places what they were saying is that whatever solution will be chosen in Northern Ireland, we can also use that. Why? Because they wanted probably to jump the bandwagon of a differentiated Brexit. They were saying that if you're going to go for a differentiated Brexit in Northern Ireland, perhaps we can find something similar for the case of Scotland. Now, I said before that Theresa May has said that she's willing to find some kind of imaginary solution in Northern Ireland. At the same time, with regard to Scotland, what she said, well, she didn't explicitly say it about Scotland, but that's what she said in her speech, is that she doesn't want to have a Brexit that will create internal barriers. So she actually did not even entertain the idea of a differentiated Brexit with regard to Scotland. So there's a difference of political willingness with regard to Northern Ireland and with regard to Scotland. Now, political willingness, of course, can be created out of good political will, but sometimes can be created also by political developments. And Joe before spoke about the decision of the Supreme Court that we are expecting next week. And indeed, it is unlikely, but there is a possibility that the Supreme Court will ask the Article 50 notification not only to be approved by Westminster, but also by the regional parliaments. If that happens, clearly the dynamics of a differentiated Brexit will change, not least because the Northern Ireland Assembly will not be there for at least a couple of months. Another way that political willingness can be created is if there is a credible threat of a Scottish secession. So if there is a real possibility that Scotland might become independent, perhaps we are going to see what we saw back in 2014 when the main Unionist Party, a week before the Scottish independence referendum, they came up with a pledge and they gave kind of a different deal to the Scottish people if they would refuse the Scottish independence. So perhaps if there is a credible threat of Scottish secession, perhaps again there will be some kind of acceptance by the UK government of this idea of differentiated Brexit. So the 3 points that I make is that there are tensions, there is legal flexibility to deal with those tensions, but this legal flexibility depends on the political willingness. Now, I want to finish this brief intervention by a final thought, which will echo pretty much what Michael said in the beginning, at the end of his lecture. So, in the 90s and the following decade, in the political science literature and the literature of European studies, there was a stream that was about the Europeanization of conflict. So there were a number of academics that they were saying that the closer you bring conflicts, like the Northern Irish conflict, or the conflict in Cyprus, and so on and so forth, the closer you bring those conflicts to the EU, the more possibilities that those conflicts will be resolved, that we'll find some kind of peaceful resolution to those conflicts. Now, clearly, it has been proved that the literature, the academics were more optimistic than what the reality was. We saw that the EU didn't manage to bring peace, at least until now, for example, to Cyprus. However, it's well documented the positive effect of the EU membership to the Northern Irish conflict. It's not only the regional funding from which the Northern Ireland has benefited, but mainly it's this idea, the perceptions of sovereignty within the EU. This idea that if you share sovereignty within the EU, if there are those kind of soft notions of sovereignty within the EU, we can also share sovereignty over Northern Ireland. Now, regardless of whatever everyone's position is with regard to Brexit, I think we will all agree that Brexit would mean some kind of return to harder notions of sovereignty. At least one of the big slogans of the Brexit campaign was actually to gain again our sovereignty, our independence, and so on and so forth. As Michael said, there are parts of those islands that they don't feel particularly comfortable with this idea of a very sovereign UK government. It doesn't bring them back the best of memories. So in that sense, it's very, very interesting to see how this process of de-Europeanization, so how this process of the UK getting out of the EU, will actually have an effect both on the conflict in Northern Ireland, but also on the secessionist claims in Scotland. Thank you.